right. Well, everybody, welcome back to Pursue the Hunt Live podcast. I'm Mike Friesen, your host, and I'm here with my co-host, Robin Rutledge. And we have a very special guest today, Mr. Bob Zimmer, our federal MP in the Northern Rockies area.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks for having me, Mike and Robin. It's a pleasure. I've seen what you guys have been doing. It looks pretty darn nice, and I've talked to a lot of your colleagues on the hunting programs and fishing programs across Canada. So it's nice that we have some locally for a change. So it's great to have you guys.
Yeah, awesome. Why don't you just go ahead, introduce yourself a little bit, tell us what you're currently involved with, what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah. No, there's a lot going on. I'm working on, as we were just talking about, supporting the public fishery. We're seeing the minister close the public fishery in basically lower part of British Columbia because allegedly there's a shortage of fish, when we know that in certain aspects there's a lot of fish. There's over 110 million every year that are produced. But we're seeing it's just easier for the ministry and the minister just to shut everything down. Well, that costs a whole bunch of people their livelihoods, thousands of public fishing families in our province.
Yeah.
And it's just not necessary. So that's what I'm working on, but we're also always, seems like firearms are never too far away with what's going on. So just trying to stay in front of that with some provincial legislation and some federal legislation, and very busy life, Mike.
Perfect.
Do you want to just touch base on your current committees or anything?
Sure, yeah.
Your resume?
So that's kind of long, but I'll just talk about it. Recently, I was honored to be appointed to the Natural Resource Committee. It's usually the one most people want to get on. So Aaron put me on there, Aaron O'Toole, our leader. So pleasure to be there. I'm still working, of course, on all these other files at the same time. But we're covering some very interesting things in the Natural Resource Committee, and we just studied forestry, and we're working on things like battery elements that go into our batteries that we actually have in Canada.
Okay.
So that's that part. I've been the Shadow Minister for Northern Affairs and Northern Economic Development. I was probably the most widely known for my ethics work, so Chair of Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics, where we dealt with Facebook and privacy and data collection and all that. That's still something that's on my desk that I deal with regularly. So it's a very busy life.
Right on.
And a little research went in your former rugby and coach there. That's interesting.
That's kind of my, I would say, I've said it many times, I would not be in this place right now if it wasn't for rugby.
Yeah, right.
It got me, as Mike knows, Trinity. Wanted to play for Canada, played Premier, got me a job coaching at Trinity, and then I got my degree there. And
wow.
It's led to many different blessings in my life. So rugby's, I always have time for rugby.
Nice.
Oh, that's cool. That's awesome.
Perfect. Okay, well, a little bit what we're going to be talking about on the show today is the hot topic right now with wildlife management, British Columbia, and the whole Act Now campaign, which Robin will get to in a minute. We'll talk a little bit about BC71, some of the amendments, and talk about that a little bit. And I just want to thank Hell's Half Acre for being our podcast sponsor today as well. So that's great. Support local.
Great coffee.
Check them out, hellshalfacre.ca. Robin, why don't you kind of lead us into the wildlife management part of the podcast here today? Yeah,
for sure. Thanks. So, like we were just discussing there before we went live, there's been another recent attack on our hunting heritage and a move for more emotional management of our wildlife and habitat here in BC, and that's nothing new, but it's a little more concerning. Well, it's always concerning, but it's way more concerning this time with the approach that they're taking by including elk and bighorn sheep into this trophy hunt status that they're lumping predators in, like bears and cougars and wolves. So there's a paper brought out in December, and I don't know if you've seen it yet or not, but it was endorsed by University of Victoria, and the professor there is affiliated with Rain Coast. Okay. And so they're known, to be on that more anti-hunting side of things, and this paper is definitely directed more to the social license to hunt and what's socially acceptable and that emotionally driven management that is, that's how we lost the grizzly bear hunt in 2017 was emotional management. So
Yeah.
I guess what I'm wondering is I'd love to hear, your perspective, both, provincially and federally, just on, this change from, or this public perception of wanting to use emotional based management opposed to, actual science and fact driven management decisions.
Well, to me, it was really striking. It was, I think, when the current provincial government came in last time, and they clearly laid out that the decision on the grizzly bear hunt was not based on science. It wasn't based on a lack of animals to hunt. Frankly, we all know in this area there's a need to hunt grizzly because they just simply, we become overrun with grizzly and black bear and that, and the predation effects that it has on cattle and other animals in that whole chain is a very negative one. But that was really, to me, quite dramatic when they made that, and they even said it was obvious that was why it was being made. Yeah. I think we need to get back, whether it's fisheries management or if it's wildlife management, we need to get back to science on this. And I think a lot of folks that might maybe be viewing this don't always see the science that really goes into some of these that should be brought into these decisions. But like you say, it's an emotional thing. And I think it's getting into, we talked about caribou recovery, and we've dealt with that over a couple of years ago.
That's right. Yeah. Yep. Ongoing,
yeah. And it really gets to an overall narrative of just closing things down. And I think it's easier for them to manage when they just shut the whole thing down. And I understand that, but they don't seem to understand the livelihoods that are attached to all this. And, folks that go hunting, that's part of their heritage and part of paying, keeping a roof over their heads and foods on their tables. Yeah. I don't think the ones that are closing it down understand the impacts of that.
Well, just to interject, I think last year, 320 million, I think, into the BC economy was associated to fishing and angling, or angling and hunting.
So it even gets to be much more profound when you look at sort of the bigger sort of footprint of that. It's a lot bigger of a number. Yeah, it's in the billions. So especially across Canada, it's around. It depends on whether you're angling or hunting, but
that's right.
Fishing alone, I think, is around. I think the impact's around 9 billion.
Really,
Canada-wide.
Canada-wide.
Wow.
And that's from tackle shops to guided tours to you name it. So, So anyway, again, that's what we're trying to do. I'm glad you guys are bringing this kind of stuff up, because it's the awareness that person in Toronto may not hunt themselves, but say, well, why are we shutting this down if it's affecting somebody in a negative way? The sustenance hunters that will go hunt a deer and a moose, we all know, we hunt for food. So the negative effects of that emotional decision, we just have to push back.
Yeah. And so, that's a great point, where someone in Toronto might not have that context, to the situation and, the decision that they make, that they may find as, something they stand for. I don't want bears to be hunted, but, they don't understand the concept that, there are, in BC alone, 120 to 180,000 black bears. So it's a very healthy population. We have a quarter of the country's population of black bears. Right. So, there's a sustainable harvest there. It's livelihoods. There's guide outfitters, the resident hunters that feed their families on this source of protein. But, I don't know if you saw, there was a statement by, what was that doctor's name? I forgot. Anyway,
in that article,
there's a doctor that just came out here recently, saying that deer hunting, deer meat doesn't taste well, and
I just listened to that podcast today.
And deer meat doesn't taste well, and it's this whole lifestyle of,
let's be real, nobody hunts.
This pioneer lifestyle is out of date. And no one needs firearms for this, and it was moving an agenda, supporting the current government, federal government's agenda of banning. We'll get into the firearm side of it, but like just
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
wildlife side of it, like shutting it down. It's not necessary.
Well, I'll tell you though. So I'm also, we did mention this in the resume thing, is I'm co-chair of the Parliamentary Outdoor Caucus. And what that is we have a sister organization called the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, and all parties. So I'm co-chair. I co-chair it with a lady named Goody Hutchings from the Atlantic Coast. She is a Liberal. We work on common issues over cross-party lines. So if it's about animal rights legislation that might negatively impact anglers, we both work on this stuff. She was instrumental in having animal rights legislation defeated as a Liberal MP. So that goes across the board politically, right? And it is. I'd like to say it goes beyond our partisanship, and we should do that as much as we can, as work together to sort of fight the other side of that coming in to shut things down. But there are efforts. We look at this stuff from that sort of all-party perspective all the time, and try and say, okay, how can we work together? Because you have hunters, surprising, and I don't want to get into the politics of this. People that hunt are in all parties. People that own firearms are in all parties.
Yeah, that's
people
right.
that enjoy deer are in all parties, and people who enjoy fishing and hunting are in all parties. So that's the way we come at it, and because we think we're much stronger together that way. So it isn't just, I'd say, this government. It's there are members in that particular government that also support hunting and fishing. We just need to make sure their voice is loud and heard.
Well, and I think, like for me, I took my hunting course in school in grade 8, and
Right.
and if you look at the educational part of it, how much is being dedicated to educating our youth on hunting and its practices of, harvesting the meat, using the different parts of the animal,
Absolutely.
getting outdoor experience, survival, skills, all those different kinds of things, where it's just so widely perceived that hunting's just killing, and they overlook all of the other life skills and elements involved with the hunt, not the kill.
Right.
But they're so intermingled now, and no one's bothering to educate themselves. And I think that's what's really frustrating for me is, if you don't want to hunt, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. Like, I don't need everybody to be a hunter.
Right.
But why should I give up my hunting?
Right.
Because you don't like hunting.
Right.
Or against hunting, right? I mean, we had this discussion in our last podcast of not, we don't want to put non-hunters in the anti-hunter category.
Sure.
Right? Because there's lots of people who just choose not to hunt but aren't against hunting.
Yeah.
And, just as a quick note, that can go along the same things with firearms too. I mean, how many people bother to educate them on firearm safety rather than just saying, well, if we get rid of enough of them, then no one's going to harm themselves. Right? Rather than educating yourselves on how to handle a firearm safety if you come in contact, or if you choose to contact one, like if you go hunt and stuff. But the education standpoint is there. Things are a lot less scary if you know about them.
Absolutely.
And there seems to be this push of, well, guns are bad, we fear guns, so let's just get rid of them, or hunting, we don't.
I think that that I call it the target voter, that person that might mid-30s, young lady that might not be familiar with firearms, or might her grandpa or her father, maybe she is familiar with firearms, but what I've seen is they listen to a rational argument. If you can give a reasonable case, and look, my constant refrain is that some of these firearms laws and some of the draconian measures of buyback programs and bans and stuff, the amount of resources that's going to cost. So imagine all the resources that could go to actually anti-gang activity and stopping guns at the borders, illegal firearms from getting across the border. Imagine that same pocket of money, that even use a figure of $2 billion, instead of buying back a bunch of firearms that were never the government's in the first place, that aren't the problem. They are not the problem.
Yeah.
How about spend the $2 billion on actually something that's going to make a real difference? So that voter goes, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
As opposed to spending something over here needlessly, and now you don't have money for where the real problem is.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I think, going back to the social license of hunting is the whole, I know a lot of hunters, for instance, that don't even use social media,
Right.
because they like to unplug, right? But unfortunately, this
I
is
envy
where
them a lot.
Well, and this is what But if we want to keep our heritage of hunting,
Yeah.
we need to learn that technology, because that's what's been used against us.
Yes.
And it's so widespread and it's so instant, and everybody's opinion matters and yada yada, whether it's scientifically based, that once the snowball starts, you know, we have to, as hunters, if we want to keep hunting, we have to create our own snowball as a pushback.
Yeah.
Did you
on social media?
Did you run into on social media when you're part of the freedom or the information committee there?
Yeah, access to information. Yep.
Yeah, did this ever come up? You know, where you know, people are attacking others, and like, is there any sort of, like, can you
Like cyberbullying?
Yeah, like can you like legislation or anything around that?
So we've looked at that a lot, and one thing that I value a lot is you know, the right to, we don't have the exact terminology, freedom of speech in Canada. We call it in our Constitution freedom of expression. It in essence means the same thing. So I value that. I value this conversation. We might not agree on everything, but we should at least be able to have that conversation freely without somebody, one of us going to jail, you know, with that conversation.
Yeah.
But so we've looked at too about the cyberbullying aspects of things, sort of that. I've even used it in different language, because social media and the powerful machines that those big tech companies, they can be utilized and weaponized. We've actually used the terminology to be, you know, they've actually caused people to die, you know, by organizing on these platforms. So what can you do about that? That's the biggest. We all know what the problem is. What to do next is the challenge, because if we want to have I call it the new digital public square, where this is where we go to the coffee shop and kind of sharpen each other or take each other's edges off.
Yeah.
That needs to be preserved in that social media space. But what's too much?
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
What do you do about going too far? And
when my kids are getting death threats over, you know, something that they've done or whatever, then like, where's the line on that?
right.
You know?
Well, this is where the Constitution becomes very important. The Section 7 right to life, liberty, and you know, all the rest that's attached to there. So this is where, even if you're in a court, eventually that's balanced. That freedom of speech is balanced about harms to another.
That's right.
Right. So the line is crossed. Somebody's trying to really call me. You know, when the line is crossed, as soon as I threaten you with something to your person, even the court will say that's too much.
That's right.
So we need to apply those same standards on social media, right?
100%.
Yeah. So it's a big problem to fix. The current government has got some legislation that supposedly addresses it, doesn't come close.
Right.
So it's a very challenging thing that's in front of us. And these, you know, digital or the big tech companies are 1,000 miles ahead of us as legislators, and we're trying to get at it. I have some proposals and some policy ideas to address that. But getting back to what you're saying about having your voice heard, the fact of the matter is some of these groups that are trying to shut these things down are very well organized, very well funded.
Yeah.
And in the millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in the province of BC alone.
Yeah.
And so then you look at one organization that might be the Wild Sheep Foundation or whatever. And then I ask, okay, what are you guys spending on sort of the pro Wild Sheep campaign?
Yeah.
Well, I think we got a guy in social media. Yeah, I think we got somebody
They're all
back
volunteers.
there. And,
Yeah.
So you're fighting this huge force
That's
with
right.
sort of this thing. But that said, we need to still stick up for ourselves. And that's what I try and do. And I guess what you guys are doing with these podcasts and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because the general media is not going to do it for us. So we have to do it ourselves.
Can you expand on just, you know, the weight that it carries, you know, having these meetings with, you know, our MPs such as yourself, our MLAs, writing the letters, like the letters that, you know, that we're sending into our members?
There's ways to, and it's a good question. It's difficult sometimes to measure the effectiveness, but we're in a campaign right now. We're trying to get the Minister Bernadette Jordan make a good decision. So I call it positive pressure. We're trying to let her know how important this is to her or to us, and that she, you know, we hope she makes a good decision based on science and based on what the evidence is. Not asking for somebody just to, you know, make a bad emotional decision or
keep it objective
or a political decision. Yeah. So letters are very effective. So I write a lot of letters to ministers directly. Form letters I don't think are as effective. The most effective way to affect change is writing letters to us, to our constituency offices. And the audience might not know the difference between what a constituency office is and a minister's office. A minister's office has thousands of staff in it.
Right.
In Ottawa, it depends on the ministry. A constituency office is what we're in right here, and it has one staff person and me. So imagine you have a call to action where you have, okay, we want to call Bob Zimmer's office over this particular issue. If we get 1,000 phone calls in a day, if I get 10 phone calls in a day, that's a big deal.
Right.
So we get calls lots, but about a specific issue.
thing.
Or we get emails, like 100, 10 emails I take a notice of. So this is, pick the minister, whoever you need to affect change with, whether it's Blair, Bernadette Jordan, or whoever.
Yeah.
Just find their constituency office's number and email. It's not their personal number, so there's no worries about getting too personal. And then that's who you need to email or phone call. We did this with Ralph Goodale under firearms when he was the Minister of Public Safety, to great effect. Kept their lines very busy and their emails very busy, and that's where they feel pressure to make the right decision.
Well, that's awesome. That's really good information.
Yeah.
Just
You
one
can
more.
find that too on the Parle website. So if they just go minister, because some people don't know, is this the real number? Just go minister or Bob Zimmer. You could even use ours as an example. Bob Zimmer constituency office, and you'll see our contact information, email and phone number.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah,
No, we'll
good.
definitely look that up. We'll probably include that in the show notes. And,
Sure.
Yeah, for
and,
sure.
And yeah, that's great. That's definitely one of the hurdles we get a lot of feedback from our members on.
Yeah. What can we do, right?
Well, they're like,
the biggest
but like
question.
what can we do? Where can we or is this even, are they listening? Like,
Yeah.
does it, sometimes I've sent in some personal letters, like just personal letters, not even form letters.
Yeah.
And,
Those are far more valuable, the personal, than the form. Forms kind of get put in a different pile.
right.
But the personal ones, I read all our letters that come in here. I read through them. So
Oh, that's great. No, that'll be good to know for our audience. And,
sure.
I had one other thing here I wanted to touch base on, just around the wildlife management, and that's the funding mechanisms, and like you alluded to, the anti groups having hundreds of millions of dollars in funding.
You
And
bet,
Wild Sheep Society of BC, we're a 1,000-member group. We're volunteer based. We don't have that kind of backing, but in the bigger picture, wildlife management in BC, and you look at the budget that is allocated and how much it has decreased. I think in 40, 50 years, it went from 6%, 5% of the budget, provincially. It is now less than 1% of the provincial budget, and just continually decreasing. So, our biologists, our
needs
regional,
are going up, and the cost or the money coming in is
that's
going
right.
down.
It's
Yeah,
getting
that's
pinched. So,
exactly it.
so I guess my question is, on a federal level or provincial level, is there, and I'll just give one example. In the United States, they've got the Pittman-Robertson Act, and I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
I know it,
yeah. So, is there anything like that? We're going to see dedicated funding for wildlife management, BC, Canada, and what's that outlook like?
Yeah, I can't speak to that specifically because I have a current policy offering that I've written myself. So I will keep that to myself until I'll know more. But I'll just say it as a thing that I support is, we've had a thing like the salmon stamp as an example, or where you have we have checkoffs in agriculture where you voluntarily check off some money to get allocated to research and development, that kind of thing. I think the user groups are more than willing to, the salmon stamp is probably one that the listeners are most familiar with. There's a certain amount that goes into the Pacific Salmon Foundation, and they allocate it on different projects on remediating streams or you name it. We need to do more of that, much more of that, because to dump more money at the top of a department, and hopefully that has some positive effect, because we see these ever increasing 120 million here to this DFO project and this amount to go into here, and I still hear from folks. I was just on the island this last weekend. They actually have to fundraise to put to basically put salmon eggs and hatchery, to remediate the streams. They actually have to fundraise to do that, so they can do so voluntarily.
That's right.
And they get a big goose egg from DFO for their efforts.
Well,
It's worse because sometimes they're applying to get to do projects and they actually get turned down or face a whole bunch of red tape to just do this really great volunteer initiative.
Yeah.
So it's even worse. Now you don't have to pay. You have a huge bureaucracy in front of you just to get more salmon in the water.
Did you want to talk about that for the Wild Sheep Society and some of the
I've
red
got
tape you're hitting?
I've got a couple of great examples, and I'll stick with the fisheries. I don't know if you're familiar with the Spruce City Wildlife Association.
I met them about a month ago.
Yeah, so like Don and Steve and those guys there.
Great initiative, great folks.
And last year, they were surveying the salmon stocks, and they had to go through and themselves collect all the species, do the rearing.
Well, that sounds easier for the listener. That's getting DNA samples and getting all that stuff and tabulating it all, and it's a lot of work.
Fundraiser, volunteer
after work hours.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right. And then I'm a member and part of the board for the Wild Sheep Society BC, and locally we've been trying now for 3-4 years just to get some prescribed fire on the landscape and increase wildlife habitat value. And we're just hitting roadblock after roadblock, and we're finally, I think, coming through that window, but it's been a very frustrating process. And that's just like you say, there's just red tape, and the goalposts always seem to change, right? And
well, this is where though, I think we need to base our programs on. There seems to be this sometimes this contentious relationship to volunteers and departments, and it goes back to my whole perception. And I'm a public servant. We really need to see ourselves as a servant to the public. And so I think if departments really wore that and really just lived that out, and I know many are. I know a lot of really good people in the bureaucracy that are good folks that are trying to help with this kind of stuff and really doing positive work. Yeah. But we need to, instead of putting more money into where we don't know quite where it always lands, look at volunteer organizations like dollar to dollar, you could put in a tenth into a volunteer organization and get out 10 times as much as what a department would produce.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So anyway, all that said is I think we need to be supporting our volunteer organizations much more, because again, you're the ones that are actually on the land, in the water, doing the good work. That you might be getting to this as the next topic of conversation is my concern is we lose folks like you, or we lose folks like the Spruce City Wildlife Group, or any of these other groups that actually fish. Those are the ones that actually do the work that remediate salmon streams. They're the ones actually doing the conservation. They're not the ones holding a sign protesting this project or that. They're actually working to do positive things for our wildlife and oceans, right?
Yeah.
And so we need to support them in that effort and doing that. And I think it goes to what you said about education. I think there's a lot of willing kids in our schools that they get told maybe there's a certain species of salmon that's struggling. And so the first thing maybe they're given is a sign to go protest something. I think though what we need to do is have a curriculum that really addresses that and says, look, if you want to really give back and really make a difference, the local salmon association is actually having a remediation work bee from 8 till 12 on Saturday. Come and help out. Show up. I'll tell you a little story. So I was in Valemount, and we have some really great salmon folks. That's the headwater of the Fraser out there. And so we were talking about a certain project that was going through. And he had been on remediating salmon for years. I've known this guy for a long time. And he says, well, I don't know if I should say this, if this is politically correct. He says, but guess how much all those protesters, it happened to be about a pipeline, how many of those protesters actually help us remediate the stream? And he does this, big zero.
Yeah.
And he says, but guess who actually helped us with that stream? It was the proponent actually donated $700,000 to remediate part of the headwaters of the Fraser. So you want to talk about real difference?
Yeah.
Versus, and I'm not saying every resource company has been great. There's been challenges.
Yeah,
there still
for
are.
Sure. Yeah.
But the people that just want to protest at Stanley Park on the weekend, how about go go look at one of those salmon organizations and how about help remediate a stream on
Like
the
take
weekend?
some action, do some
It makes
actionable
a real
change.
difference. Yes.
Yeah, and you feel
actionable
good
change.
about yourself too. On
You bet.
just on like a self note too. Like when you do something good,
Yeah.
like you feel good about it, and you're
You
like,
do.
hey, like I worked on that
Exactly.
project, or I helped with that, right? And then you see,
Yeah.
the salmon flourishing, or the wildlife populations
One
being
example.
conserved.
So on the weekend, we were talking the one stream in Vancouver Island had seen the runs go down as low as 10 fish, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So through hatchery efforts and breeding, because you can't just throw it has to be the right breeds and the right
Yeah.
sort of brood stock in there.
Yep.
They now are seeing thousands back in that little stream. So from 10, if it wasn't for those conservationists, I call them environmental stewards, just a bit more
That's
of
a good term. That's a
common
good
language,
one.
environmental stewardship. They were able to turn that declining stock, severely declining stock, into a flourishing stock once again. That's just one example of many.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
I don't know if there's any other, thoughts or direction for the future, at that, let's say the federal level,
Yeah.
for wildlife management. Is there anything, you already touched on a bit of the why,
Mhm.
that we were talking about before, but
Yeah.
if there's any thoughts to the future and
Yeah, I
what can we do?
I think they're very much the environment. We've heard a lot of concern about the environment, maybe justifiably so. I think they're intertwined with this environmental stewardship conservation. They're intertwined like this. They're not separate topics.
Mm-hmm.
As I've said, a British Columbian, even though they might not have fished, they see, okay, we have healthy salmon. That means we have healthy southern resident killer whales. By the way, that one killer whale who had its baby on its nose, and we all saw the sad story
Right.
of that situation. Just heard on the weekend that particular killer whale is doing very well, very healthy, and so they're very well fed with all the salmon that are now in our waters. So it's great for everybody.
Well, and I think, that just also attests to like the wildlife balance and, the population health as well. If we go back to just like this Act Now campaign, where they're specifically targeting, the mountain lions, like the cougars and the black bears and the wolves and whatever.
Yeah,
Okay, so you save all the black bears and the cougars and the wolves.
yeah,
Well, what about all the moose calves and the caribou calves?
Right.
What about all them?
yeah.
Right.
exactly.
So, like, I mean, in our previous podcast, we touched a little bit about or more on that, but just briefly, like, so you harvest the predators
Yeah.
to help balance like the non-predators or the prey animals, I guess
Right.
we'll call them, right? And you balance that, but then when you add hunting conservation in there, talk about selective hunting, like mature animals,
Right.
right, where they're getting older, they could be past their breeding prime, and if populations overgrow, your ecosystem decreases. Like they eat up all the food source, like we're seeing that with the grizzly bears,
Yeah.
right? They're
Right.
out eating their areas, so they're moving into other areas and urban populations and etc.
Yeah.
But because there's no balance there, because someone got their way, through the social license,
Yeah.
and now we have unbalanced population and unhealthy,
Right.
right? And then let alone, overpopulating things bring in disease
Yeah.
and all those other aspects. So for me, I always come back to education. Like I love educating others, and I, with my other, kinesiology background, doing like personal training,
Sure.
sports performance training, it's like teaching, right? When you're coaching, and it's just such an important component of it all. Like if you don't bother educating yourself, don't bother having an opinion.
Yeah.
Period. Because if you're not educated,
Yeah.
then why give an opinion, right? Because it's just like, well, no, I just want my way.
Yeah.
Well, now we're getting off the science-based methodology of conservation again, right? So for me, it all comes back to the education component and the direct correlation that when you do the scientific-based method, and you see the stream that goes from 10 salmon to thousands, and you
Yeah.
see, elk populations flourishing because we increased the predation hunt in a certain area, and everything's all ebb and flow, and you can. If you're involved with that, give yourself a pat on the back.
Yeah.
And in essence, it should make everybody feel like better about that because you're balancing that and you're not overpopulating.
Yeah, and you've understood it. Yeah,
Exactly.
I think when you talked about education too, and when I was a kid, they had the core course and curriculum, but it wasn't just to get your hunting license.
Yeah.
I think, and today I think there's a bunch of students that would gravitate to a course like that, and you're not just going to learn how to get your license, but you're going to learn how to maybe this is how you remediate a stream, or this is how you recuperate caribou populations in your particular neighborhood, and this is what we have to do about predation, and we have to do these little things to keep this thing or get this thing going. But that's a place for that kind of understanding to come into as a curriculum like that.
Absolutely.
And I think it's lacking.
Yeah.
But again, I think I think it would, especially in some of these rural, those classes would be full. As a former teacher, those classes would be absolutely full. So it's
an interesting topic.
There. Yes,
100%. I'll share a quick story before we move on to our firearms thing.
Sure.
Because we're talking about taking core in school. So I went to the rural school, like Upper Pine, till grade 8, and the late great Dennis Peters that taught grade 8 out there. He was just such an avid outdoorsman, hunter, and everything. And so we were taking our core through the curriculum, like through the one semester, and we were getting to the chapter of field dressing, what to do with the animal after the shot and whatever. And so we're all sitting in our class, and Mr. Peters isn't there, and so the principal comes in. He's like, "Oh, Mr. Peters is just running a few minutes late. He'll be right here." So he pulls up outside the window of our classroom and pulls a deer off the back of his truck and waves at us to come outside. So, and it's winter time, right? Because it's November. And we go out there, and he's like, "Today's lesson is field dressing." And it was so awesome because we literally field dressed a deer right there. It was full bodied. Yeah. And I remember some of the girls were like, "I'm not going to get my hands bloody or whatever." But they were all very interested, and it got so cold that they finally just started getting involved because the body heat of the deer. But, that's just the thing. And those are some of those things, for me, I'm way past grade 8, but I still remember them.
A biology lesson.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And, my kids are involved in that same thing. They're not grossed out about, field dressing a deer. We use it as a biology lesson, and the fact that this is how you deal with an animal respectively, and all this other kind of stuff, and everything. So there's more in the education. There's more life skills and stuff like that, and then you do start getting involved in those volunteer associations like Wild Sheep Society and all that kind of stuff too, which is hopefully brings more money to the table for them, so they can make more effort and
I
stuff
hope
like that.
so. I hope there's an effort. Education isn't a federal responsibility; it's provincial. So I hope to see something like that where, current government or future government really takes that serious. And I think based on the need for environmental stewardship, just that alone.
I really like that term.
Well, a big thing that Wild Sheep Society is doing right now. We're working with 4-H and our Ministry of Ag, and we're working on developing an education program through 4-H for that upcoming, the next generation of farmers, to educate them around MOVI, so Mycoplasma of pneumonia with wild sheep and domestic sheep. And it's one of the first of its kind partnerships with an NGO educating the next. It's a hunting wildlife conservation NGO working with agriculture to educate that next generation of farmers. So it's the education component is key, and I think having young children now, and I'm reliving all my Disney movie viewing memories of my childhood with them, and you look at that's been a big concept too, is everyone's Disney-fied now, right? The Bambis and it's just interesting now that I've got my lens and experiences to put onto what I'm viewing there, and that was almost an educational piece that was put out to the masses, right? To educate or vilify the hunter. So I don't know, is there anything coming up that we should be aware of
Yeah, I think there's an overall, and we talked about this before. There's this sort of move to closure-based management, and it comes from. There's been different governments before that had talked about the catchphrase is 20% by 2020 and 25% by 2025, and now the latest is 30% by 2030, and that's closure of land and of ocean space. And the constant question I ask back to those people that are saying let's close percentages is close for what? You know, if we saw, we've seen different examples of this in California, and that they're closing, and you know, the outside person looking in says, well, that's just a little area. It's here, a little area here. Well, they're the prime fishing spots. There's no need to do it, right? It doesn't actually, you know, really do much to solve whatever they're trying to solve, but it sounds good.
Yeah.
And guess where, like a land closure type scenario, guess where they're going to come to get those percentages? They're going to come to rural BC, rural Canada, where people hunt and fish all the time. It's why we live here.
That's
right.
right.
Because we love it.
Yeah.
But it's easy. It sounds good. So we need to really move away from percentage-based closures.
Yeah.
And again, you know, we spoke before the camera was rolling about even the caribou situation. We saw evidence in certain areas where there was no closures. There was actually an increase in caribou populations because of some effective ways to manage wildlife.
That's
and
right.
it's
Predation
really,
and
yeah.
I
mean, it's pretty simple. You know, you got a bunch of wolves.
Yeah.
And you
eating
got
caribou.
Eating caribou. You know, they're not going to. Wolves like to eat.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to deal with that. Anyway,
Robin, what's the stat of wolf kills in a week?
Of wolf kill in a week?
Yeah. I know it depends on the pack size, but
depends on
let's
the
say
pack
like an
size,
average pack size of 10 wolves.
Sure, they're probably going to take down a moose or two a week.
A week.
A week.
Yeah.
There's 52 weeks in a year.
That's
Yeah.
right. And
And
so
you're only
imagine-
talking about 1 10-pack of wolves.
And imagine you only have 50 caribou left.
yeah, that's right.
Right?
What was the success rate on black bear hunt? You were talking about that last podcast.
Yeah, so just perspective, in 1980, you know, they said we had anywhere between, I think it was 30 and 90,000 black bears, and
Wow.
their targeted harvest rate was for 4,000. And last year, like I mentioned before, 120, 180,000 animals in BC.
Wow.
We were still targeting anywhere between 3 and 5%, so that's 32 to 4,800. So we're still in that 4,000
Yeah.
mark, but we have, you know, 2 to 3,
Way more.
maybe
Times
four
more.
times more
Yeah.
animals. So there, you know, there's not a detriment there. So
Yeah, I think that understanding just, you know, and for that person that doesn't like to harvest an animal in any way, just need to understand it's either, at certain points, it's either a caribou who likes to eat lichen and eats what it eats, or you have its food for wolf packs, and wolf packs grow pretty quick. So I just think it's something that was done a while ago. It's been happening too. We all know what's been done with predation. Predation is a fancy word for dealing with predators.
Yeah.
And it seems to, I was going to say mysteriously, where the predator or predation issue is addressed and predators are addressed, caribou populations increase.
that's right.
Yeah.
And other populations increase.
Yeah.
So
It's really black and
pretty
white.
clear evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you know, there's only so many. There's a bunch of different levers that, you know, biologists have available to them, but
Right.
you know, that's the lever that they are pulling right now. But they're also, you know, there's caribou penning, so they're
Sure.
doing the maternal penning, and you know, they're working on habitat, and there's a whole bunch of different levers there that
Yeah.
they can pull to see those results.
Right.
But they have to do it effectively, and they have to be able to do it, you know, what's the, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but you know, not impacted by outside influences. They have to be able to do their job.
Right.
So,
That's right.
You know,
Yeah, setting up
Well,
blockades or whatever.
I've seen those pens in that area. There's an area around Mackenzie that I think it's kind of a secret area, but I've seen the caribou with my own eyes, and people help them along until they get to the population levels where they can sustain themselves.
Yeah.
So again, they're not paid for people that I understand. I'm pretty sure they're all volunteers doing that work.
there's
So,
volunteers, First Nations, and
absolutely.
other
Yeah.
organizations definitely contribute to that. But
Yeah, the ones that I saw around Mackenzie was a lot of First Nations were a part of them. There's First Nations involved all the way up to Fort Nelson that are involved in caribou. I think West Mo was doing
That's right.
some penning and stuff, some
Yep,
good work
Soto
there,
and-
and
Yep.
So I acknowledge they're doing some great work there. It's that it all really needs to happen, again, based on, like we said, science.
Yeah.
Let's deal with the elephant in the room that's often predation and predators.
Yep.
And we'll probably be all right. But
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to belabor that anymore, but definitely
Yeah.
really appreciate your input on that. That's
Yeah.
great. But the next topic, though, I know is also very,
Heated.
very popular.
Heated conversation.
This will get
topic
your
piece.
shares on your show, I can tell you.
Yeah,
That's what
no,
you want
that's-
to talk about.
Go ahead.
Well,
But I hear PTH is a pretty big deal, so you
well,
probably don't.
I don't know. I mean, I try to stay humble,
Yeah,
but you
well, good
know.
work though. Yeah, so go ahead. Firearms.
Did you want to kick it off? Well, let's start with what's new in the news.
Sure.
Airsoft,
Yeah.
pellet guns.
Yes, sir. It's in there.
Can you
Yeah,
Can you
explain
just elaborate
to us
what came
what's-
about
what's
behind
going
that?
on?
Well, so I've got the legislation here. That's the bill C-21. That's the stuff.
Okay.
And the particular text is there, and it's about replica firearms. That's where the airsofts and the paintballs and the BB guns and pellet guns all get wrapped up into this. And it's that category that's under 152.4 meters per second or 500 FPS. So there's basically above and there's below. But now they're saying, they're giving a blanket statement that really anything in that parameter, above or below, if it looks like a prohibited firearm, then in essence it's going to be a prohibited firearm. So there's many analogies. Your kid's paintball gun that he used to take out paintballing. My kids have gone paintballing and airsofting. If it looks like a prohib, then they will see it as a prohib if this legislation passes. So it opens up a whole can of worms. So if you're that parent and your son just got a pellet gun for Christmas, then you have a decision to make, because it uses terms like,
Is there pellet guns that look like banned rifles and prohibited firearms?
well, but this is the language. So
I mean, I'm not really up on the whole pellet gun situation specifically.
well, this is where the language, if it would looked exactly, you could say that my son's firearm or my son's pellet gun is not exactly, so then you can get away with it. But it leaves it much more wide. It says the firearm is designed or intended to exactly resemble or to resemble with near precision a firearm other than antique firearm that is designed. So it talks about a near precision or resemble with near precision. So
So
if you look at most
okay.
airsofts and you look at most paintball guns, they resemble with near precision. So then the next question is, okay, well, my son Johnny's just got this paintball gun for Christmas. How do you know? Are you going to get pulled over one day and somebody that understands firearms law says, no, don't worry about it. That's not with near precision. Or you get somebody that pulls you over that doesn't maybe have a full understanding of that. You've got a prohibited device in your car.
Now you're arrested.
Well, having a
for a
prohibited
paintball gun.
having a prohibited device, the viewers know how serious this is a big deal.
Yeah.
And there's jail time that comes with that usually, and being arrested and going before the courts and all that. So this is where this gets into very troublesome areas.
So is there discretion by law enforcement? You get pulled over, right? And you're on your way to a paintball tournament, right?
Yeah.
And they see that in the back seat or whatever.
Yeah.
They deem it a paintball gun, okay?
Yeah.
But if it still resembles a prohibited firearm, it's still considered one?
Well,
Even if the law enforcement clearly knows that it's a paintball gun?
I'll read this to you so then it's very clear. Replica firearm means any device that is designed or intended to exactly resemble or to resemble with near precision a firearm that is designed or adapted to discharge a shot or bullet other than projectile velocity 152.4 meters per second at a muzzle velocity energy exceeding 3 or 5.7 joules, and that itself is not a firearm but does not include such. So it even says, even if it's not a firearm, so even if it's that plastic gun
That you buy at the
looks
dollar
like
store.
one at Walmart. And so this is what I've got many friends in the firearm industry, lawyers that are very sharp on this stuff, and they said, well, with to exactly resemble to who?
Right.
Yeah.
So to you, I can see from 20 feet away, you look at the end of that barrel, you'll know that it's a replica. or you'll know that it's not a real firearm. But
Yeah.
you can see the rifling on the barrel.
Yeah, or it has an orange
But what
cap
about
on it.
this? What if I just hold up my thumb and finger?
Yeah.
If you're talking to a child that's 5, they
That's
might
like,
say
pew,
that
pew.
nearly resembles a firearm.
That's like the international sign for firearm.
So,
That's
so
legit.
whose judgment are we talking about here?
That's what they run around playing cops and robbers.
Yeah.
You
So
know?
we get into some really sketchy
Well,
language.
and it seems it seems precise in the language, but it leaves it so wide open for
Does.
interpretation.
It does.
And that's the scary part, because it's like I just well, and you've heard of other law enforcement operators speak up on this and all this,
Right.
like, but you know, if the law enforcement deems it a paintball gun,
Yeah.
regardless of what it looks like, and you're on the way to a paintball tournament,
Yeah.
like, and I was listening to that podcast link that you
Yeah.
sent me, and it sounded like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they're not even given a choice to even like paint the barrel orange
right.
or something like that to clearly resemble a
Nearly
non-firearm.
resembles, right?
And I mean, when I did paintball, when I was a younger, like older teenager or whatever.
Sure.
I mean, maybe paintball guns have obviously improved by that point, because I didn't shoot a paintball gun that shot over 500 feet per second.
No, but and you're right. That would make it easier, because if you could, so
Muzzle velocity seems like.
that same person that pulls you over, and it sees air paintball cannot fire over 500 FPS.
Yeah.
Most pellet guns won't either.
No.
But this allows for under that
Because
rating as well.
because of the replica language.
In essence, yes.
So
So if it was above, that would be an easy one, because
Yeah.
you could easily prove that. Look, this one won't do it.
Stamp the barrel or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
But it says the key language is that it's capable even. So even if you had something, I mean, the language is so wide and broad that it really grabs in all of those replica firearms as potentially prohibited now. And so then you get into things like if you get into the legislation, there's a bunch there. Imagine your son's going to an airsoft, going across town, right?
Yeah.
What about there's provisions in there too. There's provisions in the BC law too that are problematic about a minor selling another minor one of these firearms. Like a kid would
Right.
sell his paintball gun to his buddy. Well, if you're selling a prohibited device as a minor,
Well, and even I think it's been a while since I've owned a paintball gun, but I think or even a pellet gun.
even the ammunition is
Yeah.
now going to be if you sell ammunition to a prohibited device, which is
Like paintballs.
Yes,
Wow.
yeah,
So
it's all there.
Do you,
Yeah.
do you,
My
you
head
still
hurts.
do you still need a PAL to buy a pellet gun under 500?
Not under.
Not under.
No, over is my understanding. You do, right?
So-
There's that certain
Yeah.
part. Yeah.
Can you go get a restricted license so you can do airsoft?
Well, if it's a prohibited though, so you'd have to have a prohibited license to have anything that's
A
prohibited.
replica.
Oh, right, not restricted.
So this is again, I think this is what they're trying to tie this into, and Bill Blair's tried to tie this into, is that list of 1,500
Yeah.
guns banned by the OIC, or assault rifles, as they so-called. It's
Do you know
sort
if
of a
Blair's
misnomer.
taken his pal?
Has he actually?
Yeah. Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just, I'm really
Yeah.
curious to see if that
No.
guy's ever taken a fire.
I heard him on one statement. It was so we all. I'm speaking to this when it's coming to the House, Bill C-20. So our shadow minister was Shannon Stubbs. His response to her, we counted 10 lies, and I'll say that for the camera, lies about what the bill actually was, as opposed to what he was saying it was. So it's I've had my
like
debates.
slipping things under the table onto the bill that he wasn't
painting
talking
it,
about.
Well, just painting it in an incorrect way. So saying it's doing something that it isn't, saying it's really addressing illegal firearms in Canada when it isn't.
Yeah.
There's so many of those things. It's again, I just wish they would look at what the real problem is. Just take the resources and say to your police chiefs association, okay, where can we best spend the money to really make a difference and an effective
Well, and
change
that's-
in our big cities.
That's exactly what I was gonna just comment on. Was okay. We're gonna dedicate all these resources
Yeah.
to confiscating paintball guns
Yes.
and airsoft guns
And
when
legal,
we're
and
not
legal
increasing border patrol and crime going against like gangs and stuff like that.
The buyback alone, which we call it confiscation because the buyback, they never owned them in the first place.
That's
the government, right? That alone is going to be in the multiple $billion amounts. So imagine a taxpayer resources, which are going to be thin after this whole COVID thing's over anyway, because of the overspending. Now you're going to be spending billions that is going to do absolutely nothing for public safety.
Can you just give us like a run through Cole's notes of just the status of where everything's at related to Bill C, like kind of what's next, what's happened?
Yeah, so right now we're going to be debating Bill C-21. That's the newest legislation, because you mentioned C-71. That's where a lot of this stuff started.
Yeah.
The C-71 was legislation from a previous government, so this is Trudeau's government before this one. They made provisions in that law for order in council changes to firearms. The interesting part to that is, I'll make it a little aside, there's provisions for orders in council. So in the legislation, orders in council are legislative. It's a legislative tool. Right in the order in council provision, it says is not to be used for changing of firearms classifications. It says it right in there.
But they did it anyway.
So to me, the premise of the whole thing's like screwed up. So anyway, so they
do as I say, not as I do.
Apparently, we could talk so much about this.
I know.
So C-71, the provisions, order in council, so the bans come in, and Blair says, look, there's not going to be any shotguns, even though we know there's shotguns involved. It's not going to affect your duck hunting guns, even though it does. If you take the chokes out, and it depends on who you're talking to the RCMP. The RCMP have one definition of barrel. The CBSA has another definition of what barrel means. So under that CBSA definition, they even confirmed that our concerns are valid, that that certain diameter pushes these shotguns into the prohibited category as well. So anyway.
With only the chokes out?
Chokes out, yeah. Because it's
so
going
if
to
you
be,
just leave your choke in, it's fine.
Well, but
it's a removable
piece, right?
It's just a slippery slope.
Yeah, it's one of those things that we asked, because I've been on the front with this a lot, CBSA's position on this, and they confirmed what we were saying. And I said, well, I tried to host a meeting with CBSA commissioner, the RCMP commissioner, and Blair, and they wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But anyway. Because someone's going to go to jail.
Well, so anyway. So what we have now with the most recent iteration of sort of what the fallout of C-71 is C-21.
Right.
And that's where we see there's the airsoft provision, replica firearm prohibitions. 2, search and seizure without a warrant.
Really?
Is super problematic if you read it. Number 3 is the municipal handgun ban. It just keeps getting waivers. Like a municipal handgun ban and its effects.
That's a big one.
That is a big one. So I've talked to folks, in the Mission Gun Club as an example, and there's people all throughout the city that legally and lawfully have handguns, right?
Yep.
So you have a handgun owner, and in Toronto, there's some really great clubs out there that do so safely. Imagine you own a handgun in Richmond, and you try and go drive across the city, and we know the reason why I'm pointing out Vancouver is because the mayor there has said that as soon as this legislation passes, they have the intent of passing a bylaw that will prohibit handguns in the city of Vancouver. So that poor guy that owns it in Richmond now
can't cross.
Is going to have to drive all the way around Vancouver. And who knows, you're one bylaw away from not being able to have your handguns. And some people, it means a lot to them. So they're looking at, well, okay, where can I move now?
Well,
right?
it also alienates, a whole group of sportsmen and women,
right.
In the target.
Olympians.
Yeah, competitors.
Yeah.
Yeah, people that represent our country, with this stuff even. So the handgun ban, and it's simple bylaw. So once the bylaw, any municipality, I've talked to our local mayor, she says she's not supportive of it.
That's good.
But any municipality could enact a simple bylaw saying we're going to ban handguns. Then once that happens, the word goes out to the minister in Ottawa, and then the minister says, this is specifically how you have to implement your plan.
Right.
So once that happens, the federal government comes in and goes, whoosh,
just swoops in.
Yeah, and this is the way it's going to be. Yeah. So
they don't really municipally, if that's a word, govern it. They just they initiate it,
Yeah.
and then the federal government just swoops in.
They will still be, because the way the RCMP works in that, it's still very much a municipally based police force, right?
Right.
Even though it's the RCMP. So it would be very much an integrated process where the city would have to be involved. But it just is a place, it's not their jurisdiction, I think, is what I really would boil it down to.
Yeah.
And, that it's where firearms were never part of a municipal, mayoral, council campaign. Now these are going to be conversations.
Yeah, it's
that are
always
gonna
been
happen.
federally.
Right.
Yeah.
So fast forward to BC, Alberta and Saskatchewan, the premiers have already said, look, because provincial law kind of oversees municipal law.
Yeah.
So they are making blanket statements. We're not doing any of this, guys. Saskatchewan and Alberta, because they can do that. The province of BC has come out with Bill 4, and they are supporting the direction of this government to do that.
Really?
And so we're not going to get much resistance to this other than, anyway.
So
yeah.
just to clarify, provincially they're supporting Bill C-21.
In essence, so there's a separate
BC is.
Yeah, there's a separate bill where they
Through Bill 4, you said.
Bill 4 that
Yeah.
kind of it kind of locks. It's not exactly the same, but it works with C-21.
Right.
Are those your specific copies? Or are those available to the public?
Oh yeah, no. So these are mine. I've done videos and gotten. These are the actual copies that I've used in the videos. So when I
Okay.
hold them up,
Yeah.
so it has all my notes and highlighting, and you can just
Okay.
see
But
that I've read them.
Are
But
those
yes.
available?
Are those available that we
100%.
can tag them on our
Yeah.
description?
So
Yeah.
we can get you those links easy.
Okay.
And I challenged, your viewers and your listeners, check some of this language out yourself.
Yeah.
And that's why I like to read actually out the language, because people go, well, that sounds like baloney.
Yep.
Well, I'll read it to you. It's right there in black and white.
That's
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
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 So, one last thing,
Yeah.
or two last things. The reference to the long gun registry is in here as well, and records
Right.
that need to be kept in that too. So what was supposed to have been destroyed? I could explain that. It would take an hour. But I did some research on why that information's still here and shouldn't be. But there's a reference to sort of resurrecting parts of that, because they want access to this information, right? And then, the last point I have here is that, like we've said many times, it does nothing to stop illegal
Yeah.
firearm activity.
And diverting our resources that we have, as thin as they may be,
Yes.
to this useless confiscation of
Well said.
toys,
Yes.
essentially.
Yeah.
And like I was going to ask you as well, and might just be an opinion base, but there has been multiple law enforcement that has come out and spoken against C-71. So when you have a law enforcement, high-ranking officer, right?
Police chiefs.
Police chiefs, etc., saying this is crap.
Yeah.
How much enforcement do you really think is going to be put towards it in the long run?
Well,
Because as a police chief in their jurisdiction or whatever, they're going to say, okay, we need to actually focus on the problem here. Like, we're not going to maybe actively go out and look for paintball guns because it's a waste of our time.
Right.
And our community's dollars that they're paying us to actually protect them.
Yeah.
But we're out hunting teenagers wanting to go play toys with airsoft guns and paintball guns.
That's kind of up to the law is the law. I guess that's where I come at it from, and we're trying to make sure there's good legislation so that poor mother that that buys some things that really keep their kids active.
Yeah.
They're actually out. My kids used to paintball on a Saturday with their kids, their hockey friends, and sweating and just getting out, enjoying the great outdoors like we all appreciate.
That's right.
And that poor person's going to get pulled over and possibly in trouble because they've had this thing that looks like a replica firearm, or looks like a firearm.
Well, I really hope that our law enforcement officers can, I won't say use leeway, because a law is a law. I understand that, but use good judgment. I think that's important because, I think it's going to overall affect the young population,
but
not the older population.
I think I always use speeding as an analogy for law, because if the law is set to 60 kilometers an hour on a highway, that is the law.
Right.
And at any point in time, if you're above that or you're not obeying that law, you can face consequences. So
right.
regardless of all those sort of the what ifs, the law is poorly written. It's again targeting the wrong people.
Yeah.
And we hope to see it defeated, but it's looking like it has support across in different, different parties and stuff. But
Can you give us an update, kind of on the next step or the status?
So the next step we have, I'll just say this for your viewer, just for legislation in general. There's really 3 readings. The first reading is when it's sort of tabled in the House. It's debated. Once it starts to be debated, that's called the second reading, and then if it passes that after so many hours of debate, then it's voted on. If it passes, then it goes to committee. Committee is where changes can be made, amendments made, etc., and then it'll come back to the House for third reading, and then it'll have a certain amount of debate, and then if passed, then it goes to the Senate for the same process, and then if it passes that, so that they're like identical processes.
Yeah.
Those, in essence, 6 readings.
Okay.
Then if it passes there, then it receives royal assent and then law. So some have stated, some firearms groups even have said, look, realistically, this has no chance of passing before a spring election, if that's going to happen.
Right.
Believe me, I've seen legislation move at 1,000 miles an hour if they want something done.
Well, so look at how they put it in place.
Right.
100%.
Exactly. So I don't have that confidence that
Right.
it's going to necessarily be slowed. I'm hopeful that it'll be slowed. But this is all, it's a distraction for somebody that I would say, and I don't want to get political because I know this is a distraction for somebody who's in hot water and trying to say, okay, I'm going to do something that appears to be a good thing for my cities.
Fair enough.
That's what I think this is all about.
Well, and I think, it brings the point, like, why right now? Like,
right.
We're in this COVID thing,
Yeah.
and and now we're putting this as a primary topic.
Yeah.
It really doesn't show, in my opinion, great lack of priority.
Yeah.
Right, where, like you say, like there's so much noise going on right now.
Yeah.
Hey, look at me, with COVID-19, and
Yeah.
But
that happened. Oh, when did that happen?
Yeah.
Well, in the same sense, the BC government came out and said hunting and fishing is an essential during COVID, and then now they're supporting, gun ban. If, say, you are using an airsoft for squirrels or grouse or some sort of small game, therefore now you're prohibiting the use of a tool to conduct an essential service.
Right. Something that we've grown up on. I've grown up with pellet guns and stuff, and I just think it's aimed at with a no pun intended, the wrong target. Focus on what the real problem is, and let's focus on it, guys. And that's, I think, what I've said in a more of a sad way. Is you look for some redeeming qualities in some legislation. Oh, well, at least they have this little part in there. When it doesn't. It just like, come on, focus on the real problem. And then the poor lawful firearms owner that gets wrapped up in this stuff. That's why we fight for those folks, is because I'm a firearms owner myself. And I see my dad, getting wrapped up in this stuff, and they're good people that obey the law. They put new laws in front of them every day, and they follow them to the letter. And for these guys, that's still not enough. And yet we see with the one thing I'll mention, so this is Bill C-22. We didn't talk about that yet. So Bill C-22 literally introduced 2 days after C-21. 2 days.
Wow.
And guess what it lessens consequences for?
Oh, yeah, I've heard of it.
Lessens consequences, I'll read them out. Using a firearm in commission of offense. Using imitation firearm in commission of offense. Possession of a firearm knowing its possession is unauthorized. There's some better ones coming up. Possession of a prohibited or restricted firearm with ammunition. This is lessening consequences for these crimes.
That's right.
Possession of a weapon obtained by commission of offense. Get this one. Weapons trafficking. They've actually lessened consequences for.
Makes sense.
Possession for purpose of weapons trafficking. Importing or exporting knowing it's unauthorized. Discharging a firearm recklessly. Robbery or extortion.
That is wild.
So we're basically encouraging use of illegal firearms and prohibiting the legal ones.
Well, I wouldn't say encouraging.
Or not encouraging,
but
like
on the one
definitely
hand,
not discouraging with consequences.
they're giving more laws for you to follow, Mike, as a lawful firearms owner, and the guys and people that are involved in doing things illegally,
Are getting
getting less consequences for that. So figure that one out.
wild. You know,
And that's we'll share you the bills. Like you can look them up yourself. They are attached to the
well.
criminal code. It's about that thick.
Yeah.
But the references are pretty easy to find. It just takes a bit of time. So, but that's where we just go. Come on.
I want to be respectful of your time. I know
Sure. We'll just
you're a
keep
busy guy, but this is such great conversation. And
He told us we were his last meeting today.
are we?
Yeah, you're good. I don't.
Well, we're in the wrong
know.
venue for that.
I know.
We need to be over at peace or something.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted. I know we've touched base on this a couple times, but just really want to reiterate, you know, what can hunters and anglers, gun owners, and the constituents, you know, what can they do? You know, what is it that we need to do in order to be heard, like you say? Like we need to, you know, and we've got the Wild Sheep Society BC campaign act now, BCWF campaign, the Canadian gun owners, you know, they've got their campaigns going. Just highlight for us, you know, what we can do as constituents.
The best is just what you just spoke about. Become part of be a club member of some of these interests that you have. Just don't sort of you know, read the material. Become a member of either, you know, you name it, the BCWF or whatever, in terms of wildlife. Because one thing that I've seen is there's two sometimes they're interwoven groups of the firearms person and the hunter. They're not always the same though, because some people that are hunters say, look, you don't need those kind of firearms, right?
That's right.
I get that.
But then there's IPSC.
Yeah,
or, you know,
exactly.
Those competition styles.
But I would like to say for that person that says, look, that's not for me, we're all in this together. So whatever your interest though, if you're an IPSC, then get involved in that association and buy a membership and I'm members to two firearms organizations, CSSA, Canadian Shooting Sports Association, and I'm also a member of CCFR, Concerned Canadians for Firearms Rights. So I'm part of those two organizations and know them well, but just be active. And the best thing people can do in responding is to reach out to these ministers to their constituency offices, and either make a phone call in there, and it might take you 30 to 60 seconds to say, oh, it's Bob Zimmer calling, and I just wanted to let Minister Blair know I disagree with him on Bill C-21. I completely think you're targeting the wrong people. How about dealing with illegal firearms?
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
I mean, the whole thing, the premise of the whole illegal firearms thing and firearms law, it's like putting up a sign in the neighborhood saying no guns here. Do you think those gangbangers and the gangs and guys that are the problem are going to obey those signs?
They haven't.
Obey the laws?
They haven't yet.
They don't. We know
No.
that. Yeah, just like I said,
They don't care.
Don't.
Yeah.
But the firearms owner, we do.
Yeah.
We obey those laws. So it's just the wrong target again. But call those the ministers' constituency offices, not just the ministry offices. It's very specific. Where their home riding is, you want to call those offices.
Yeah.
Call or write an email.
Yeah.
And just become active. It's
Flood those inboxes.
Yeah, just and give your opinion, like an honest, true citizen that your viewers are. Just let them know that you don't like what they're doing,
where their concerns are. And yes, we will post. We'll post those links to where we can find the bills and some other reference materials in our descriptions for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's been an awesome. It's been an awesome chat.
Really appreciate your time.
Oh yeah, no problem.
And discussion here.
Yeah, I appreciate what you guys are doing. Really like the fact you're doing this locally, and you know, it's I think good for our local folks that may recognize you from the grocery store, and then I see those guys on TV now.
Yeah.
But again, that you're putting out the time to make change, and that's why I got involved in politics, was to make a difference, and you guys are making a difference in whatever, not just pursue the hunt, but in your organizations that you're a part of too.
Well, and I think, you know, become a member, but then actively participate.
Yes.
You know, the dollars definitely help. That goes into conservation funding and stuff.
Yeah.
But then also see where you can actively participate and contribute to the change. So awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Bob, Robin. And I'm Mike. And don't forget to check us out, social media, Pursue the Hunt on Instagram and Facebook.
Right on.
The link for this will be posted in both of our social media channels and on our YouTube channel. And subscribe to that so that you guys get notifications and when we post new content. So thanks again. We're going to wrap it up here.
Yeah,
Bob,
privilege, guys.
Robin, I'm Mike, and we
Yeah.
are Pursue the Hunt.